Over to you, Bob.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this broadcast brought to you by the Spiritist Society of Bournemouth and Poole Christian Spiritualist Church. I'm Bob Williams from the Society, and I'm standing in tonight for Fabrizio, our usual presenter, who's away on holiday. We are very, very pleased to have with us tonight Roberto Watanabe, Roberto Watanabe, who is from the Spiritist Federation of Sao Paulo in Brazil. He is a very, very distinguished Spiritist in Brazil. He is, by training, a man who knows a lot about business studies, but also he has tremendous expertise in psychoanalysis and philosophy. We're very pleased tonight that he will speak to us on the subject of the structure of our personality, a very interesting topic for us to listen to and hopefully to ask questions. There will be an opportunity at the end of Roberto's talk to ask questions, and I hope you will take part in that process. It's usually very, very fruitful. But before I hand over to Roberto, let's go to Lawrence Saville, who will this evening conduct our prayers. Before I hand over to Roberto.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, and welcome everybody to another of our joint collaboration nights. If you could just take this time, please, ladies and gents, just to still the mind, to draw in those thoughts away from the outside world for this short time, to connect with that image and that thread of the divine which runs through all of creation. Join together in thanks and in harmony. That no matter how hard this road it is that we travel, no matter how many things that come in our pathways, we are safe and secure in the knowledge that all things are meant to be. Things that come into our life are there to help us to grow and to enrich that spirit within. So we should never live in fear. We should never live hiding away, but we should always stand in the light, bravely taking on all that comes our way, no matter what our thoughts and our constructs of the energy in which they present themselves. They are there to help us to grow and nurture that spirit within, and join as one on that path to perfection, for which is intended for all things. We now place this evening in unloving care and keeping, and we know that in this new way, where we can now reach out across the world, although we are divided by space, we all reside under the one sky, on the same planet, and part of the same race. So let us now join together in this exploration, this inquisition into understanding those spiritual aspects of our everyday lives. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Lawrence. It's now my great pleasure to hand over to Roberto. Over to you, Roberto.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Larry. Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here with you for the first time, our colleagues from Bournemouth. And you have this wonderful program about Joanna de Angelis. And I would thank for Fabrizio to invite me to talk a little bit about her and about Carl Gustav Jung, who was the psychiatrist that developed this analytical psychology, and upon whom Joanna de Angelis based on her development of Spiritist psychology. So let's share my presentation here. Is that okay, Bobby? Can you see the presentation? Hello?
Absolutely perfect, Roberto.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that is exactly what you need to do this presentation, sir.
Okay, thank you, Larry.
No worries.
Okay, so the topic of our speech today is the structure of our personality, or the structure of our psyche. So in the left, we have Carl Gustav Jung, and on the right, Joanna de Angelis, a spirit. So Jung was born, he was born in Switzerland in 1875 and passed away on 1961. So he was a psychiatrist, and by the beginning of the 20th century, he met Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, and he shared some friendship during 7 or 8 years, very fruitful, sharing their ideas or with each other. But then after that, they split away and went through different ways, because Jung developed some new ideas that Freud could not accept. For example, the concept of a collective unconscious that we are going to see today. And so after that, Jung developed his own psychology approach, which he called analytical psychology. So we are going to see today just a part of his psychology, right? Because when you study the psyche or the personality, you can have a structural approach to see what are the components of our psyche. Is that we are going to see today. But you also can study from the point of view of the dynamics of our psyche, the psychic energy that Jung said that flow inside our mind. And you can also study our personality from the point of view of the development through our life and our lives. And so that there is many approaches you can study, right? But today we are going to focus on the structure. And Jung understood that our psyche or our personality, we have a structure which is our psyche is composed of 3 parts for Jung. The first part is the consciousness. So if we remind of Freud ideas on our psyche, he used to say that our psyche is like an iceberg, right? You have a part of the iceberg which is above the line of the sea, of the water, and that is our consciousness, right? And before the water, you have most part of the iceberg, and that Freud called what was our unconscious. So Jung divided the Freudian unconscious in 2 parts: a personal unconscious and collective unconscious. So the consciousness is that part which is above the water in the sea, from the iceberg image, is the part where now, for example, is the part that is activated now, right? When we think, we feel, we doubt, we ask, so we decide. So in general, when we are awake, so the consciousness is functioning in us, and so it is the known part of the mind. We know this part because we are conscious of that, right? And in the center of the consciousness is the ego, Jung says, So Freud said the same, right? So this is the part that we know, but we have our psyche. We have in us a big part of our psyche that we don't know. So that was the discovery from Freud, right? And Jung followed him on that. So that unconscious part, and Jung divided it in personal and collective. Personal unconscious is that part, and that is basically two parts. For example, our memory. We know a lot of things, but this lot of things that we know is not in our consciousness now, right? But if someone asks, for example, well, what is the name? What was the name of your grandmother, for example, from your mother's side? So then you immediately you remind the name, right? So this is in the personal conscious. So it's related to the memory. But what was more interesting to Jung is not this part of the personal conscious, but it was the part which was related to conflicts, which he called the complexes, right? So an unsolved problem, for example, a moral issue, a trauma that we had, for example, in our childhood. So some things that make us suffer, the ego try to reject that, and then that remain on our unconscious. So in there they form these complexes that Jung says, right? So we are going to see some concrete examples in a few slides. So this is the personal unconscious, he said. And the personal unconscious is related to our present existence, right? So it's something that is there in our mind and that we experienced it since we were born until today. And but Jung said that we had another part of our unconscious that is not personal, is not that something that we experienced it, but is something that we inherited from the species, from the human species. So this is what he called the collective unconscious. He says that it is the reservoir of images inherited from the ancestral past. So something that is related to our phylogenetic side of our life, right? And not the ontogenetic. Ontogenetic is everything that happened since we were born. Philo or phylogenetic, I don't know exactly the pronunciation, is something that is related to the human species. So since the past times, right? So prehistoric times. So in the collective unconscious, through that, Jung can explain, for example, the fear of snakes, for example, or fear from the dark, right? Because since the prehistoric times, we have experience as humanity with snakes, for example, or from with the darkness, right? For example, let's imagine on the prehistoric times we are walking in the night, and then we are attacked, for example, for an animal or for another person. So that's from that situation we developed this fear from dark, right? So and then we have it still today. And what is interesting, Jung says, is that, for example, even a person who was born in a big city like São Paulo or like London, for example, right? If he find a snake, if someday he find a snake in front of him, he will feel this fear, because so it's not something that he experienced, but it's something that he brings with him. So this is what Jung says about the collective unconscious. just here we have an image. If you imagine the psyche as a circle, we can imagine this first line as in the analogy of the iceberg. Let's say that the first line is the line of water, right? So above the water we have the consciousness, and there we have the ego. And then above the water in the sea, the rest of the iceberg, and which is the biggest part, we have first the personal unconscious, which is closer to the line of the water, right? But deep in the water, we have the collective unconscious, which is something that we inherited from our species, right? So this is the concept that Jung developed regarding our psyche. And what he says that in the center of this unconscious part, we have the self. So we have the ego, which is now, for example, we are awake, we are thinking, we are paying attention, we are watching. So here is the ego functioning, but we have also the self, which is there in our unconscious. We are going to see the ego is the same concept that we have in Spiritism. And when we talk about self, we are going to see with Joanna de Angelis that the self is the spirit, right? So that is the difference that we can advance now. So ego, we have our ego, and then in the Spiritism we have that issue that when we are our psyche, we have our psyche not only to know about ourselves, but to relate to the other people, right? So, and in this relationship, we tend to concentrate in ourselves more than caring about the others, and that is what in the Spiritism we say the concept of selfishness, right? So this is a pride, for example, vanity. So all these kind of emotions are related to this selfishness, which is a problem, right? Because in the book, in the Spiritist book, on question 913, Kardec asked for the spirit, right? To the spirits of all devices, which may we regard as the root, and they answered, we have already told you many times, selfishness. So all evil derives from it. Study all devices, and you will see that selfishness is at the bottom of them all. So this is a question that we can raise from this structure that Jung presented us. And Joanna de Angelis says the same, right, in this book, In Search of Truth. She says that the ego disguises itself in personalism, which leads to the individual to the domination of others in the face of the difficulty of doing so in relation to himself. So that is very interesting, even in Jung's concept, because we have our psyche, we have our personality, but we are social person, right? So we live with others. And then the question is how we relate to these others, right? To the neighbors, as Jesus said. And how do we care for them, or do we try to dominate them? And that's what Joanna de Angelis is saying here, right? Because in many times we can't dominate, for example, our imperfections, and then we will see later, and then we project these imperfections that we have in other people, right? And then we see in other people what actually is in ourselves. So we are going to see this a little bit later, right? So ego we have these issues to discuss. And then in the personal unconscious, we have the complexes that Jung says. The complexes is something that is in our mind, which is unconscious to us, and the complex because they are a kind of a center of emotions, related to some situation that we experienced in the past, a trauma, for example, right? So when in the relationship with the other people, some of these complexes are activated, then we feel the emotions are related to that. So that's what Joanna D'Angelo is saying here. And she is mentioning here two kind of complexes, inferiority and superiority. And she says that in this case, lots of people struggle themselves, right, with these complexes. And they have their origin in the conduct maintained in previous lives. So now she's introducing the issue of a reincarnation, right? Some previous life. That they applied these conducts in an ignominious way. So if we have, for example, the inferiority complex, we have a behavior with the others in a way that we are rude, she says, ungrateful, demanding, being pleased to humiliate the servants and auxiliaries, and remaining dominant, inaccessible. Because what she's saying here is something that Jung discovered also in his studies and his research, right? Because he treated lots of patients and developed his theory based on this practice. When we have an inferiority complex, as we said, is something that is unconscious. So if I have an inferiority complex, it means that unconsciously I feel inferior to others, even in intelligence or moral or whatever, right? And then Jung said that we have there is a kind of a compensating behavior. If we feel inferior inside unconsciously, we try to we compensate by showing the opposite in our behavior. So that's why Joanna is mentioning here that the people feel pleased to humiliate the servants and auxiliaries, right? So it seems that the person have a superiority complex, but it's the opposite, right? And then we have the opposite situation, the superiority complex, that Joanna says here, that when you have that, people do not even allow healthy coexistence in the family and social circle in which they live, and not concealing the inner conflict that annoy them. So now also, if you have this superiority complex, we try to behave in an abnormal way with other people. So complexes are related to problems, right? The mental, psychical problem that we may have. And then going to the collective unconscious, Jung says that in the collective unconscious, we have these archetypes. And archetypes means primordial image. So what Jung says is that when we are born, we bring already together some archetypes in our psyche. For example, the archetype of a god, of hero, old sage, demon, mother. And for example, Jung says that when the baby is born, he brings together already a virtual form, let's put it that way, of a mother. So it's like an empty form, right? There is no content there. Then when the baby is born, and then he sees his mother taking care of him, then that empty form is filled with the image, with the real image of the actual image of his mother, right? So this is the meaning of the archetype. So that happens with all the other archetypes: God, hero, demon, sage, and whatever. But what Jung pointed out is that there are four main archetypes that we bring together when since we were born. First is persona. Second is anima and animals. persona means mask, right? The mask. Anima means, we'll see, the anima, it means the soul. Animus means the spirit, but in this case, anima, animus is related to gender, right? Male or female. Then we have the shadow and the self. These are the four main archetypes that we all bring since we were born, right? So we are going to study now each one of them. What is persona, for example? No, before that, we are going to make some comments about reincarnation, because Jung says that these are archetypes, which is in our collective unconscious, we inherited from our ancestrals. Genetically, we inherited, right? So for Spiritism, it doesn't happen that way, right? So these archetypes that we bring from the past, we Spiritists say that is because of the reincarnation, right? So we bring from our past lives all these archetypes, right? So it means that we experience that not in this present existence, but in past existence. So we all experience it personally. It's not something that is collective, right? So that's what Spiritism says. And Kardec, for example, in the book, Spiritist book, he asked the spirits in question 166, does the soul live in many corporeal existences? And then they answered, yes, we all live in many lives, and those who say otherwise wish to keep you in the ignorance in which they themselves dwell. So reincarnation, right? So from there we have all these memories that we have, even on personal level or collective level. And Joanna added here in her book, Personal Triumph, we believe that this collective unconscious corresponds to the experiences carried out by each individual, so it's personal, going through the reincarnation stage. So everything that is on our side means that we experienced that, if not in this present existence, in past existence, right? So that's the difference between Jung's concept and Spiritism concept regarding our unconscious, right? And then we're going to see here the persona archetype. Persona archetype means that persona means mask. So in the ancient Greek drama, the actors use the mask, right? Because, for example, at that time, only men could acting on a play, acting on a play. So if there was a woman, for example, acting there, or acting a woman personage, that would be played by a man. So he should use a mask, right, with a female appearance. So persona means mask, and so it allows the composition of a character. So what Jung says, that we bring this together since we are born, and we develop these masks to have in our social interaction with other people, right? Because, for example, we play many roles, many roles in our life, right? We play the role of a teacher, for example, of a father, of a manager, so of a friend, so of a son or a daughter. So we play these roles, and this is important for our lives. The problem is that when we identify ourselves with these masks, then the problem arises, right? So that's why Jung says that persona can be harmful if we stick excessively on it. An example, if you, for example, we all say, for example, that Jesus is our guide and model. And then we develop a persona trying to follow this guiding model. But imagine that a person identify with this model, this guide, and then he starts to believe that he is as perfect as Jesus, and we are not, right? We still are well behind Jesus, and then this is identifying with the persona, and this raises a problem because these people we start to showing something that he's not, right? So this is what Jung is saying here. The other, and then we can see an example of a persona on the Gospel, right? On where Jesus says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, because you are like the white sepulchres, which outwardly appear to be beautiful." So the mask, right? The persona, but within are full of a dead man's bones and of all filthiness. So we try to appear to be good for the others, and the inside we are full of imperfection, of bad thoughts, for example, right? And so he says, so you also outwardly indeed appear to be just. So you appear to be just, but inwardly you are full of iniquity or hypocrisy, right? So this Jesus already mentioned it there about the persona. We can see here. Joanna says the same, right? So she says that in the kaleidoscope of human behavior, there is a great concern to seem more than to be, right? Giving rise to mirror men, those who reflect the fads, impositions, and opinions of others, as they don't have their own identity, right? And they become what pleases the people with whom they live. We can reminded that the movie from Woody Allen, right? Zelig, a person who in every situation he adapted himself, or he acted like the people there would like him to act, right? So he don't have his own identity. So that is a problem of persona. The next archetype is anima and animals. Here we have what is the anima for Jung? Anima is the feminine side of the male mind. It means that and animals is the male side of the female mind. So what Jung is saying here, and the figure we can see that he means that we, for example, if we are a man, we have consciously, right? In a consciousness, we are a man. So in our unconscious, we have an archetype of anima. So is a feminine side, a female side in our unconscious. And the opposite happens with a woman, right? A woman, she shows outwardly as a woman, but inside she has this archetype, which is have a male side. So what Jung says is that we have this because through the generation, through our life as humanity, men always have had the relationship with the woman, right? And vice versa. And for this relationship, man develop in his unconscious some female aspects, and the woman some male aspects. So, and the question here is to have a balanced personality. So this allows this expression of the two sides in consciousness and behavior. What Jung is saying here, for example, you see that, for example, in the Western world, men are educated to be macho men, right? So they are a boy raised hearing boys don't cry, right? So it is repressing that female, it's anima, right? Which is the feeling that he feels he cannot show. So, and the opposite happens with the woman, right? Woman cannot, a girl cannot be so strong, so show some, let's say, be a dominant person, for example. So these kind of things actually is not good for people. That's what Jung says. So that's why he talked about the balanced personality, right? We men can show our affections, our feelings, right? The woman can also show sometimes has very strong will, for example. There is no problem with that. So that's what Jung is saying here. And then it's where Jung says that the anima in animals is raised through the humanity, and the relationship between man and woman. Spiritism says differently, right? Because Spiritism says that we are spirits, and as spirits, we have already reincarnated as men and as women. So we have the experience on the two genders and the two sexes. So that's what Kardec's asking here in question 201, right? Can a spirit who was animated the body of a man animated the body of a woman in a new existence and vice versa? And the answer is yes, since the same spirit can animate both male and female bodies. So from there we can understand that the animal side and inside we men comes from our experience and in some past reincarnation as women. So, and the opposite with the women, right? And Joanna says that the behavior experienced in each anatomy and sexual function will answer for the animal's archetype, which is just what I just said, right? So this is the anima and animals. And then we have another archetype, which is the shadow, right? So shadow is an archetype that contain a greater amount of animal nature, Jung says. It needs to be domesticated. So shadow is the dark side of our psyche that we don't want to show to others, right? So we hide inside our unconscious. So the classic example of this is that the book of Robert Louis Stevenson, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? Which is this picture here. The man here on the left is Dr. Jekyll, and on the right, his shadow is Mr. Hyde. So the story says that Dr. Jekyll was a scientist, he developed a potion, and when he drank that potion, he could split his evil part, right? The evil part of him, and then so that the good part is Dr. Jekyll and the evil part is Mr. Hyde. And the problem is that so during the day, Mr. Jekyll was a scientist, right? Had his activities as a scientist, but at night he became Mr. Hyde. He transformed it to Mr. Hyde, and then problems that this evil side get out of control of Dr. Jekyll and starts to commit murder, for example, right? So then he ended up killing Mr. Hyde, which means killing himself, right? Because it's the same person, right? And then that's the tragic story here. But you see that the Mr. Hyde in this example is all our imperfections, defects, vices that we try to hide from the other. That's why Mr. Hyde, right? We try to hide from others, and we repress it in our conscience. And that is a problem, because that's imperfection. Then we show only our good parts to others, but we are not that, right? Because we spiritists, for example, we say that we live in a world of trial and expiation. So in this world, evil still predominates over good. So everybody knows that we all know that we have our good part and our, let's say, imperfect part, and we could accept everything, right? Problems happen when we try to repress our evil part, our imperfection. So that's what Jung already realized through his research and treatment of his patients, right? So that's why he's saying here, the shadow is a source of motivation, creativity, strong emotion, and deep intuition. And when the ego and shadow are in harmony, the person feels full of life and energy. So it means that when we repress or something that we understand in us that are evil, we are repressing also all our motivation, creativity, and strong emotion. That is also is a problem, because then we leave part of our real life, right? So this is what he's saying here. And shadow is related to passions, right? Because the strong emotions, he says, animal nature, related to the animal nature. And then Kardec in Genesis chapter 3, he commented here, right, that the exercise of the passions in the early stages of existence is a necessity for the conservation of the species and individual. So there is some point in our life as humanity that passions is something good, because it's something that make us going forward, right? But coming out of this period, the spirit finds itself in moral needs when reason arises in our conscience. When reason arrives, passion is not something that is useful anymore. So we need to control our passion, right, by our reason. So that's what Kardec is saying here. But it's not that we need to repress our passion, right? But control, to accept and to integrate in ourselves and to control. And Joanna says the same, right? The shadow can be analyzed as an inheritance of the unfortunate acts that the spirit would like to forget, but which proceed in a mechanism of a punishment. So that was repressed is still there, and they try to go right to the consciousness. So we cannot avoid that for a long time. And then Jesus also talked about that, because when we have our imperfection and we don't accept in ourselves, then we tend to project it to others. So if you are, for example, if I am an envy person, but I cannot accept that, then I project it to somebody else, and then I start to say that person is envious, but actually I'm pointing to myself, because I am, right? I just project in him something that is in me. That is what Jesus is saying here in this passage of Matthew, right? The Gospel of Matthew. How is that you see a speck in your brother's eye, but you do not see the plank in your own, right? You first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will be able to take the speck of your brother's eye. So, and this is the situation here, the projection of the shadow of our imperfection. And then Joanna says, the unconscious repression of personality conflicts leads the ego to project them in other individuals. But it can be fought by honest acceptance of oneself. So an integrated person is a person that accepts what is good in him, but what is imperfect in him also. It's important to start from this solid base, to develop then the virtues that we say in Spiritism, and to control our vices or defects or imperfections, right? So this is what is being said here. So let's see the last archetype, which is the self. The self is represented by a mandala, this figure here, right, from the Indian philosophy. And the self means the center of our psyche. So it is the main archetype, Jung says. because it harmonizes all the others, and it unites personality, give us a sense of firmness. It's related to the process of individuation. So individuation, divide, right? A person who represses his shadow, for example, is a divided person, because he tried to show only his good side, and they try to hide his evil side. So he's divided. So when he accepting the let's say the evil part of him, then he become a whole person. Individuation means that, right? And the self is the archetype that urge us to do that, right? To become a whole person. And it depends on the cooperation of the ego, because the self is unconscious. So ego, with all the defects they may have, it's necessary, right? Because through the ego, we become conscious of all our unconscious part, be it shadow, anima, right, persona, or even self. And the self provides self-realization, peace with oneself and with the world. So self is a very important archetype. And we can see with Joanna, she said here in the Personal Triumph, that it's the self in its totalitarian representation is the immortal spirit, heir to himself. So self is the spirit. So it's like we say, right? We are now reincarnated as Roberto, Bobby, Larry, but these are the ego, right? The persona, something that we represent in this present life. But we are more than that, right? We are all spirits, although each one with its own individuality. We are spirit, which is going through many lives, right? So, and the spirit is the self, is this important center of our being. No? And Kardec says in the Spiritist book, human beings possess a soul or a spirit, a divine spark that endows them with a moral sense and an intellectual reach that the animal do not possess. It is the principal being, pre-existence to and surviving the body, preserving their individuality. So this is the spirit and this is the self. So here we can see what Jung calls self is what the Spiritism calls spirit, right? And then Joanna says in Reflecting the Soul, if the ego is the center of consciousness, the self is the center of the total psyche. Right? And then she said that what is the development of ourselves is we developing our ego, and at the point where we reach ourself, and then let's say they merge together, and then you don't have ego or self separated. You have just the spirit itself, right? Or the self, the self there in the sight. So we can imagine, for example, Jesus, for example, in him, ego and self was totally integrated, right? So, and that, but to reach that point, we have a long way to go, right? So Jonas says that step by step, the attributes of personality, which is the ego, are developed, expanding the contents of individuality, which is the self, and improving the latent aptitudes that are the germ of divine presence in us all. Right? So here we have a vision of Leon Denis in The Problem for Life and Destiny. So I think I'm going to go faster. And he says that in every human soul, there are two spheres of action and expression. There are one sphere which is exterior, so it's turned outward, right? And a stereo to the other, one stereo to the other, which is the me, manifests the personality with its passion, weaknesses, and insufficiency. So the me is the ego, right? So the ego is he's turned outward for the world, right? And the other is interior, profound, immutable, Denis says, right? It's at the same time the seat of consciousness, the source of the spiritual life, and the temple of God in us, which is the self in Jungi, the Jungi words, and is the spirit is the spirit in our world as a spiritist, right? So this is another approach here from Denis. And here's just an image, right, of the psyche. You have the outer world and inner world. So outside, inside. So outside, there is the ego, and the ego relates to other people, to the outer world, through the persona, through the master, right? To the many roles that we play in our lives, right? The play of a teacher, of a father, of a manager, of a subordinate, and so and etc. And then going inside us, we have the self in the center of our unconscious, and we have other archetypes, right? Which is the shadow, the animals, and deeper in our internal world. So this is something that through that we can understand, right? Our psyche, according to Jung, right? So let's go to a final consideration. So what we can learn from all these, right? From Jung's ideas, from Kardec, and from Jonah de Angelis. What we can learn from all that is that we have a main lesson in our lives, right? Which is to know ourselves, right? That is the main lesson that we can take from all this presentation. And that's what Kardec in question, I didn't put the number here, but it's question 919 on the Spiritist book. When Kardec asked, what is the most effective means for improving ourselves in this life and for resisting the draw of evil? And then the Spirit answered, a sage of antiquity, which is Socrates, the philosopher, has told you, know thyself, right? So the important thing is to know ourselves, which means, which we have our imperfections, don't try to repress and project to others, right? But try to accept it. Well, I am an imperfect person. I have a good things, but I also have some not so good things, right? So accepting this, we stop projecting others, and then stopping projecting others, we stop the conflict, for example, right? Because if a person is if we say up to other person, you are envious, for example, that is starting a conflict. And Joanna says the same, right? It is indispensable to acquire knowledge of oneself, because the organic impulses provide for the immediacy of pleasure. Attraction to the outside world leads to innumerable emotional imbalances. So lots of a problem we have, right? When we don't accept our shadow, we repress our anima, for example. So if I am a man, I don't accept to show my feelings, for example. Well, that's the beginning of the problems, right? If I don't recognize the self that I am, or the spirit that I am, and if I don't see the corrective value of the persona, which is not something that you should be showing to everybody, something that I'm not, but just a means of improving my relationship to others. So if I can understand all that, then I can develop this what Jung called the individuation process, right? So to integrate myself in as far as I can in my total psyche. So that is mental health, and that's, again, Jesus was the best example from us, right? And then so Joanna says in the self-discovery, this book, she says the kingdom of light is internal, and it is imperative to penetrate it so that the darkness of ignorance does not prevail. Jesus says the same, right, in the Gospel of Matthew. If your eyes are good, your whole body will be bright. But if your eyes are evil, then your whole body will be dark. So it's the same, right? So it's interesting to see how a good psychologist Jesus was, right? And then she added, becoming more and more internalized without losing contact with the physical and social world is the proposal for the encounter with the legitimate values of existence. What she's saying here is that we must know ourselves. We must internalize to know ourselves, to know, to reach our that many things that are in our unconscious. But we cannot forget about the social world, right? Because we are in constant contact with others. So it's a very dynamic process here. So that's what mainly what I would like to bring today. Sorry, I was a little bit long in my presentation. Here, just an idea of the books that I researched, right? Leon Denis that I mentioned. There are many books of Joana de Angelis, The Spirit, right? Divaldo Franco here is the medium that psychographed these books, from whose author was Joana de Angelis. Here we have a very interesting book about the Jungian psychology, and then the Kardec and the New Testament, the Gospel from St. Matthew. So thank you for your patience. And now I'm open to any question or comments you may have.
Well, thank you so much, Roberto. That was fascinating. You didn't take too long at all. I could have done with more. Most interesting that the Gospels, which record Jesus's teaching, line up so well with the other teachings that you were bringing to our attention. And there's a lot of harmony, and therefore I think a lot of truth in each of what those writings are saying to us. I found it fascinating. I would encourage our viewers and listeners to post questions, because this is your opportunity to ask Roberto any issue that has come to your mind, or anything you didn't understand or would like more information on. One thought that came to my mind is our personal accountability for our unconscious self. It's all very well to want to improve ourselves for those things we're aware of, but what handle do we get? What control can we seek to have to improve ourselves for those unconscious parts of our personality which are harmful to us?
Well, what's important here, Bobby, for example, in the Jung's work, he tried to fix those kind of things, question that like this that you raised here, through the treatment of his patients, and applying the theories that he developed, and that we just saw part of that today. But we have our Spiritist doctrine, and then we have a lot of lessons that we may learn, and through that lessons, especially from which is on the Gospel according to Spiritism, for example, but also in the Spiritist book, I think we can have there the guidelines where we can work on all these issues, right? Because you see that all this theoretical issue of a shadow, for example, at the end is a matter of accepting our imperfections, right? So that is not easy. It's not easy to practice. It's easy to say, but not easy to practice. But I think that it demands an honesty from ourselves to ourselves, right? And to accept, well, I have some virtues, but I also have some imperfections, and then recognize that, right? I think, for example, when we are in constant relationship with other people, and in this relationship we have some good moments, like here now, for example. So we are new friends, and that is very good to feel. But also we have a conflict with the other person, right? Even in our work in the Spiritist center, right? So in all these conflicts that may arise, we tend also to see where the other part failed, right? And we don't see where we failed on that conflict. So if you try to separate the thing and try to see what is my part of this conflict, what is my responsibility on that, or which part I'm accountable for, and then I start to get conscious, because the key word here is consciousness, right? So we must become conscious of what we do, even good or evil, right? So, and then I think that the Spiritist doctrine give many guidelines to reach that goal. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
I don't know if I answered
Well,
your
acceptance of our weaknesses doesn't mean that we're on a path of no correction. It means that we don't beat ourselves up over it primarily, but we seek to improve ourselves.
I beg your pardon about it.
Accepting is the beginning of improving.
Yeah.
Is that, would you agree with that?
Yeah. Because, for example,
I'm sorry, I was saying accepting our weaknesses is not saying that we're going to run with them. We're going to attempt to change them. Yes.
Yeah. By accepting, you can change. If you don't accept, you cannot change, because it's not in our consciousness, right? We are not conscious of that. I think it's that way. I think, for example, even the Spiritist doctrine, I mention Spiritism, but I can mention spiritualism as general, right? Any religion, any belief, any spiritualist beliefs. We have some guides, some example, like we say Jesus as a guide model, and so in Buddhism we have the Buddha and so on. And then I think there a danger that we identify with these models, and then we start to acting like we were as perfect as they are, and we are not. Huh? And then when we do that, we start to criticize. Wow, you are doing bad. So you see, this is the problem of a persona that Jung says. He says, for example, if is a religion person identify with the archetype of a god, for example, he starts to criticize everybody. He sees evil in everywhere, in everybody. So that is a problem, right? Because that's not real, no? And there is this kind of I would say that there is kind of a danger in ourselves, right? So I think that's why Jesus and Spiritism talks a lot about the humility, no? Humility, for example. We must be humble. So I think.
Yes.
We had a question come in earlier on from Gabrielle. Yeah, if I could just find it. Gabrielle, where are you? There we go. And Gabrielle's asking, could we blame any part of us, I mean ego, subconscious, etc., for some of our bad habits, manner of living, instead of our spirit?
Not actually, Gabriel. Thank you for your question, because we talked about the ego, but behind the ego is the spirit, right? Because this is something that is interesting also, because we try to think that we are this person incarnate now, right? So try to think like this, that I am a man, that I am a Brazilian, that I have this profession. So this is concentrated on the ego, and if we forget that we are a spirit living this incarnation, right? So the ego lived by himself can do lots of wrong things, let's put it that way. But at the end, it's the spirit that is doing that, because actually the spirit that forget about himself, right? Or doesn't know about himself, who he really or she really is, right? So that's something that the spiritualism and the spiritism try to raise in our mind, right, in our consciousness, to have this realize this, right? This reality that we are spirit living some personal experience in this present body, for example. But if we start from that point of view, then we can understand, for example, when Kardec on the Gospel according to Spiritism, and I think chapter 1 or 2, I don't remember very well, he talks about the point of view, right? When you have a point of view of this present life, also suffering is hard to face, right? But if we face from the future point of view, or as a spirit, problem suffering diminish a lot the impact it has on us. So it's a kind of let's say a mindset that we the correct mindset that we should have, and I think spiritism brings that to us. So
Very true.
yeah. So
Yeah,
ego,
but-
excuse me.
No,
So
Karen.
ego, subconscious, they cannot be blamed for that, right? At the end, I would say nobody can be blamed for that. The ego, subconscious, or even the spirit, because as I mentioned that during the presentation, we are still in a world of a trial and expiation. So we still are, as a spirit, we are imperfect. So it's just, let's say, it's natural that we have a lot of mistakes, right? So in that mistakes, we are going to learn through our lives, and not only this, but many lives. We are going to learn what is the correct way, right? To think.
Yes.
I think.
Indeed. And I think with that statement there as well, it does highlight a very common route of thinking. Could we blame? So when we blame something, we absolve ourselves of the responsibility because it's that fault. It's not my fault, it's that fault.
Yeah.
But part of this growth is we've got to accept that actually, yes, that came from me. I now recognize it, that this could be done better, put better, rectified, not repeated. So instead of apportioning the responsibility to something else, we're taking on our own personal responsibility, which is one of the tenets of spiritualism, that, you know, we come here to learn. And all right, we all make mistakes. Nobody is, but if you're perfect, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
We all make mistakes. But
Yeah.
the thing is to understand where the error is and to rectify and to grow from that. So yeah, that's really interesting, Gabrielle. The lovely Elsa, beg your pardon, Elsie. God, you kill me. Elsa Rossi.
Opa, Elsa.
Elsa, yes. Quite sure why take so complicated to understand our own personality. I think maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, Elsa, what you're saying there is, do you remember your circle about the conscious and then the collective unconscious and the personal unconscious? I think is maybe applying to that precept of saying, you know, why is there so much going on? Why can't we just be simple? You know, why can't we be like a cat? As long as I've got food in the lap, happy days.
Maybe because we are complicated. at least it was what Jung realized, right? So Jung, as a psychiatrist, he worked in a hospital in Zurich. He lived much of his life in Zurich. And he had many patients, psychotic patients, schizophrenia, for example, and then after that he had his patient on this clinic, right? So with all these experiences, he researched on the depths of our conscious, our psyche, right? So and then I think that from the complexities that he found there made him develop his analytical psychology, but it's a little complicated. I think because we are still a little bit complicated, but that's not going to keep it that way forever, right? So. Yeah. As we grow, as we understand ourselves more, and then that will change for sure.
Indeed. Another question here from Sue Townsend. She's asking, do you feel that eventually it is possible to dissolve the ego through self-realization and begin to live as our authentic self?
Not exactly dissolve, Sue, because the ego, let's say, it will remain. You have the ego and you have the self, and the problem at the present time is that most of us, our ego is disconnected from ourself. So we through our development process, we should first build a bridge between the ego and the self, and then they get closer and closer, and until the point that they are integrated. And so it's not that the ego is dissolved, but the ego, let's say, amplify its reach, and then at a point where he integrates itself with the self. So I could put that ways, right? So it's not to dissolve, because if we dissolve the ego, it means that in some point we would become unconscious of everything. We cannot do that, right? So that's why ego is important in this process. The point is not to put the ego below the consciousness, but to bring what is unconscious to the consciousness. So in that matter, ego is very important. So I could answer in that way. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So to say then that to bring the ego in line with the rational thought and the consciousness of things, rather than letting the ego being the driving force, that was a lovely explanation about ego and personas. I absolutely love that, because we're working on archetypes at the moment in a circle, and that made so much sense, that the ego is a part of us, but we've got many parts to us. We've all got anger as part of us. We've all got love as part of us. We've all got all sorts of but if we let any of those reign superior, then we're losing that balance side to things, and something is dominating the rest of our personalities.
So the ego is very important in the process, and Jung acknowledged that. Because, for example, he used to like I said, he used in the beginning of his career, he used to treat schizophrenic patient, for example, in the hospital in Zurich. And what is a schizophrenic person, a psychotic person? is a
Well,
person.
we've had some very, very interesting questions there.
Yeah. Okay. So just to complement, so a psychotic person is a person who is totally controlled by the unconscious. So the ego is controlled by the unconscious, the archetypes or complex or whatever. So that's what Jung realized. So ego is very important.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. There's no more questions coming in at the moment. Bob, do you know who we have on the next evening, or? Bob, do you know who we have on our next evening together or not?
I'm afraid I don't have that information. I'm a very poor substitute this evening for
Be
Fabrizio.
psychic. Pluck a name.
I'm afraid my ego won't allow me to be so proud. As to be like that.
Very droll. Gabrielle's just saying thank you there for the answer. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And
I think Sue's added a further question.
So Sue again is asking, does self-realization reveal that we are consciousness having an experience as spirit in human form?
Yeah, exactly so. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. The ideal situation would be if we thought as spirits. We are having an ego, let's say, experience, right? And not the opposite. So, and when we think, act, live as a spirit, then we have this, what you call the self-realization, which Jung said individuation, right? So an undivided person. Everything is integrated in a whole. So that is living as a spirit. Like Jesus is the better example, right? We have also Socrates, we have Buddha, we have another example, right? Francis of Assisi, many other examples from people who were self-realized, and there they lived as a spirit and not as persons, right? Incarnated persons. You are right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a profound moment when that starts to come into the conscious area of our understanding. That we are spirit having this human experience.
Yeah, because living as a spirit means, for example, you have we have in our mind that we have the infinity in front of us. So I can now have 90 years closer to pass away. Doesn't matter. I have the infinite in front of me. Then when I passed away, I just go to another kind of a living, right, on the spiritual world, and there I still keep studying, working, doing a lot of things, and then I return here again, and then we just have the infinite in front of us. If we think that way, everything changes, right? So the suffering, the problems, the tribulation that we have, all these, like Emmanuel Spirit says, everything goes, right? Everything goes because we are immortal. So that make a big difference.
Very true, and it's us being able to. It's this physical persona that we are at this time, trying to comprehend or to grasp infinity, eternity. It's how our human mind just absolutely struggles with it. There is a very famous picture from Carl Sagan and it's called The Pale Blue Dot, and it's a picture of the Earth. I'm just seeing if I can get it up to share on the screen. There it is. And I love this picture because it helps me to at least start trying to understand infinity. And we go to it, bear with me, here. Have we got it?
Not yet.
No? Why is that not happening? Anyway, there's a picture of the Earth taken from one of the Voyager ships. And in this immense blue screen, there is this teeny tiny infinitesimal little dot. And that is the Earth. The picture of the Earth taken from hundreds of thousands of miles away. And it just puts things in perspective, you know, that we are, and in that tiny dot is everything that we know. But it's like seeing in the picture that's surrounding our pictures tonight, the tiniest splash of colour amongst everything else. And it does actually start to make you realise, whoa, you know, how big is everything. Anyway, that's enough of my waffling. I'll get off my soapbox now. Another question just come in from Gabrielle, and it's asking a personal question. And when will I be allowed to go to FEESP?
FEESP. FEESP is our São Paulo State Spiritist Federation. Yeah. Well, Gabriel is here from Brazil then. We are going to start our activities attending to the public in beginning of October, and next year we hope we can return to normal activities if we don't have any problem with a new with COVID, for example, right? But we intend to return to our activities in the beginning of next year. But starting October, you already can go there, and we will start our spiritual assistance, and then we will assist the public. Okay.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. There are no more questions coming up. Yeah, I'm waiting for it as well, Elsa, and I can't get it to get up. How many years have I been doing this? I can't share my screen. I don't know why, but never mind. Gabrielle, from myself. Gabrielle, beg your pardon. Roberto, from myself. Thank you very much. I'll hand back over to Bob.
All right. Thank you for this opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Roberto, and thank you, Laurie, for spiritually holding my hand this evening. Very much appreciated. It's been a very, very interesting talk, and I hope very much to look at it again in a recording and to learn more and deeper about what you've pointed us towards. Thank you so much for us to take on board. Laurie, would you like to? I beg your pardon, Roberto.
I thank you for this opportunity to be here with you. Thank you.
Laurie, would you like to give us a closing prayer before we close off tonight?
Yeah, certainly. So once more, dear friends, let's join together, putting aside this physical time here in this plane of existence, and sensing and understanding that thread of the continuation of life, that thread which brought us into this time and will carry us out from this time and into the beyond, back into that time of the life between the lives. And we give thanks for the understandings, for the knowledge, for the wisdom that's shared here tonight. For all events such as these are there to enrich our mind and to enable us to understand better our journey and our mission here at this time. Amen.
Amen. So be it.
So be it.
Thank you very much, everyone. Best wishes.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Keep safe.